right. Hello and welcome to Connect with Adult Ed, the NMEA podcast. I'm your host, Nadia and we have a very special guest today. We also have Jamie. Jamie's here.
Hello.
Yeah, we have a very special guest, Michael Carriere. Can you sort of introduce yourself, Mike?
Yeah, I'm Michael Carriere, and I'm the program specialist for the Next Steps Adult Education Center here at the UNM-Valencia.
Oh, that's a fancy title.
I know, right?
Program. I like that. I don't think I've ever been a specialist. Not in my career. Can you tell us, like, what does that mean? Like, what is your role exactly?
Right now, my role is to ensure that the instructors have working equipment that they have in their that they need in their classroom, troubleshooting, answering questions that sometimes can pop up, 6 o'clock when I'm home and the evening instructor's like, this isn't working. I need some help. I write the non-credit agreements for the instructors and anything that I can help the instructors with and make their job easier is what I do.
Okay. So would you say like maybe an equivalent to that in other programs might be like a coordinator role?
That might be it. I know UNM is pretty particular about terminology. So that it could be that. I know a while back we had to settle on or had to pick specialist out of a list of names because of things that I know I wasn't privy to on that conversation.
Got it. Yeah. I'm sure other I have most of my experience in nonprofit adult ed. So there's all this like kind of red tape and
there is,
a lot of, I guess, bureaucracy and just expected structure that I'm not used to. Just from hearing from, you and especially other colleagues that work in colleges and university systems, especially there's more of them than there are people like me working in nonprofits. So I just appreciate just hearing all the different, what we call like structures of adult ed. There's so many different ones. It's fascinating. Yeah. So Mike, but you teach too, right?
I do. I teach math foundations, math applications here on this at the Valencia. And last semester, it didn't make this semester, but last semester we had the EMT basic, and I was in that class for the IET.
So you were on the academic side?
Yeah, as kind of the support for that, for the instructor to help the adult ed students in that one. But I don't think we had any actual adult ed in there this time. So we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, interesting. So how long have you been in adult ed?
21 years full-time, longer, not full-time. So, maybe going back to 1999.
Wow.
As a tutor and then as a part-time.
Yeah. So, what is that? I can't do math right now, which is good.
25 years.
Thank you. Which is the theme today, actually. We're here to talk to Mike about math because you have so much experience. So you do teach math. You said foundations. What was the other class you mentioned?
Applications. And then when it doesn't make all the time, we have a third class, math analysis. And that one's an interesting class. It does, like I said, it doesn't make all of the time.
Well, I mean, this isn't quite part of the question, but it is a follow-up. Can you tell us, like, just a very brief, what's the difference between the three classes that you've taught?
Math foundations as it sounds, it's foundational to the four operations, the order of operations, things that are going to be used a lot later in applications, where we're laying the foundations for linear equations, higher level probabilities, and aspects like that. And then applications really gets into applying those foundational skills into more complex problems. And then from applications to analysis is for students that really are on the track that they want to go to college and they want to do well on their college entrance exam. And in there we get into probably about the first month of trigonometry. We've done some logarithms, really complex nonlinear equations, some matrices, but like I said, it doesn't make a lot.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's pretty advanced for usual high set or adult basic education. Interesting.
That book I used to teach In fact, I would pull problems from my Math 150 book when I started college. So that was in 96. I'd use that pre-calculus book.
Ooh, okay. Well, we're getting really
Sounds
advanced
scary,
here.
man.
Yeah, you're kind of scaring me. So which leads us into the next question, really.
Okay.
So math instruction can be challenging or scary, as many students experience that kind of lack of confidence or like get a lot of what is now termed math anxiety. Is there anything new or unique that you're doing in your math class that you find to be effective?
I don't know if it's new, but one of the things I do in every class is I let the students know that I also suffer from math anxiety. Like, I know that crippling feeling of feeling like you're the only one in a classroom during the lecture or during whatever's happening, and getting that sinking feeling that everyone else is getting this but me. I like to let the students know early on that I have gone through that and still go through it at times. And the same experience happens on tests. You know, so you see one thing that throws off my confidence, and then the whole test becomes gibberish. So I like to talk to the students about something that I do early on. And we talk about this in class, that when, taking math tests, working on homework, and you start to feel that panic, to kind of ground yourself. Find something on the test, find something on the homework that you find that you can focus on and work on that problem. And then, I'll ask myself, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? How does this helping the problem? And in class, this comes up a lot. A lot of my students will say, well, I'm just not a math person. I wasn't born knowing math, and I let them know that's just not true. There are some people that pick up patterns faster than others, but for many mathematicians, they study and practice and question their work and their answers. I find that students lack faith in their math ability because practicing math doesn't come easy, and it's rough, and it takes work and practice.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that some students are like, well, I wasn't born with this ability. And like a lot of people aren't really. We learn this, and some just learn faster than others. I mean, we do, like you said, we're all born with this kind of pattern recognition. But that doesn't mean you come out of the womb and you can do, operations, right?
Right.
Exactly.
We didn't come walking out of the room or out of the womb or talking, but we have that pattern recognition.
Right.
Yeah. But I like how you said that you talk to them about, you share your anxiety and your fear. And, Mike, I wouldn't have guessed that because just, the few times that we have talked, you seem like math dude. So like, it's great that you kind of level with them. Like, I've been where you are, and I still am at where you are sometimes. I mean, that's a great strategy. When I was teaching, I would say that to my students too. Like, I would never tell them I'm bad at math or I'm not good at it, because I feel like generally then the student's like, then why am I here? Why were you hired? But what I say is like, I'm learning myself. I'm working on this. I was in your place, but part of my job is that I have to learn to get to a certain point so that I can teach you. So I'm working on this in kind of a similar way that you guys are.
I have let my students know, because they'll ask, well, you're just, or they'll say, you're just good at math. And I'll let them know. And this might be some honesty that's horrible. I was not really good at math early on. At least I wasn't a good student of it. I didn't get really good grades. So I really had to study hard and long. And I let them know that like, this did not come easy to me at all. It was a struggle. So,
yeah, I mean, it also makes me think about, when I was teaching math, and I would always tell my students, you don't ever have to like it to be able to be good at it, or to be able to understand it and be adept at it. I don't like it. I don't like math. And I fully admitted that I don't like it, but I can do it and I can teach it. And sometimes when they see you make mistakes on the board or things like that, I think that helps them to understand that math, like you said, I think that you just hit the nail on the head there, Mike, with it being a skill that you have to practice and you have to keep practicing. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important.
You just said something, when they see you make a mistake. So every math class that I have, it is open with, the story that I just told you, that I wasn't a very good student. But I let them know, if you catch me making a math mistake, you cannot catch me making a spelling mistake. I barely get my name right half the time. But if you catch me making a math mistake, I owe you a beverage of your choice, non-alcoholic. I mean, it can be alcoholic. And I have, Dr. Pepper's, Code Reds. I just had to just last week, a student got me, I mismultiplied. So she got a Starbucks caramel latte. So yeah, they catch me.
Oh man, that really adds up too. Those Starbucks drinks are, they're like
no
$5
joke.
and change.
Yeah, it was no joke.
Sure do.
I like that. Yeah, I really appreciate that kind of errors. Like, so you're turning it around on them. And so like, instead of them being scared of their own math, it's like, oh, I'm going to check the teacher and I'm going to get this non-alcoholic beverage that I want. And your student was smart to get that.
Oh yeah, they catch me too, and they'll watch. They'll watch me like a hound. Hey, wait, does this count as a mistake? Oh, I didn't put my units. You're right. I get you guys on your units.
That's excellent.
That's a way to get them to pay attention, though.
Yeah, I mean, math anxiety is very specific, but I think we also see anxieties in general. And like, just your advice of just bringing it to a human level, bringing humor into it, that can really work in a multitude of levels with or content with students. It's excellent. So one thing that you didn't mention that we do want to talk to you about is that you have something called a light speed class.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us about that.
A colleague and I dreamt up that class, I'd say, 2016, I think, was about the year was the inception. And we wanted a class for students that were right there on the verge, on the cusp of getting ready to take their full battery of exams. And they wanted a really intensive class. And this, the students are like, we want an intensive class that's just going to prepare us for everything. So my colleague, Amy Stallman, we sat down, like, how can we bring together science, social studies, reading and writing, mathematics into this 5-hour course that would meet every day and make it interesting? And so we would tell stories, and like the whole class revolves around a story that we're evolving through. The last one we did was a zombie apocalypse, and you had your bunkers, and the idea was to have everyone would have different ways that they would allocate these resources and travel to these areas for distance equals rate times time problems, and plot drone attacks with linear equations, and then write memos to their staff. And we just wanted to figure out a way to incorporate it all, and that was Lightspeed.
That is fascinating. So you said that it's 5 hours a day, and how many days does it meet?
It's gone through a couple of evolutions. In the beginning, we were trying to get 40 hours for the students, and it was 2 weeks and 5 hours a day. So it was Monday through Friday for 5 hours for 2 weeks. And we only do this class in between sessions. Like right before we go on to winter break, our classes will end. They usually, in the past, they ended just a little bit after Thanksgiving. So we would have kind of like this 4-week liminal space where we could just kind of throw this class in there. And then in between the spring and summer session, we would put it in between those sessions.
Wow. Okay. So that is really intense. And that's quite a way to attack math anxiety head on. It's like if you're afraid of airplanes, you get on a long flight, right?
Right.
So like in this way, it's like, okay, then you're going to be in a classroom 5 hours a day, 5 days a week for 2 weeks. That is so much. That's intense. That is amazing. And I really love the way you put a scenario base, and it's a fun scenario. Oh, I love it. So the last one that you talked specifically about a zombie apocalypse, and you said memos. So like, can you remember exactly what they were writing, or what was the prompt or expectation?
Amy and I were really heavy into Fallout at the time. So it was kind of like you had this underground bunker and like this vault. So they were sending, messages from this level to the next level. Hey, we need more food, but the food is in this other quadrant, so I need you to go do it. Just getting used to writing, hey, I need someone to do something, and I can't go down there, so let me just send them this memo. or this letter or something. And that would just be part of it. Then the next piece would be, okay, now we're going to go to said quadrant, and how are we going to get there? How fast are we going to travel? How long is it going to take? Plus the return trip. And then how much, whatever it is that we were hauling costs this much, it weighed this much, and that's going to slow us down. So are we going to get back in time? Part of the Pick a Path books that we grew up on, it was kind of all in there.
Yeah.
But that's such a fun way to have application in there right away. I mean, it's so fun. It's a fictional scenario, but it's still applied math.
It's applied math, and then you're also incorporating writing skills to math. That's a really different way, because I always thought that when I taught, I always thought that writing and math should go hand in hand in some ways, but I definitely lack the creativity you and Amy have, because my thought was here's a journal prompt about how did you solve the problem? Stuff like that. Or here's your math journal. What did we cover this week? How did you feel about it? Stuff like that. That's way more fun.
Definitely the students will even say, during some of our assignments, I don't like that one. We should try this. All right, well, let's do it. Let's see how that works out. Yeah.
Giving them a choice too, that also can help alleviate that anxiety. We have to, I think when we think of math anxiety, I think we're making it really bigger than it is. It's giving students choice, giving students that freedom, that wriggle room rather. And we also have to keep that in mind that we're teaching adults. Even if you got 16-year-olds in your class, we treat them like adults, right?
Yep.
So when you're treating them like adults, that means with adults, you give them those choices. You talk to them at their level, not below it. Absolutely. And those are definitely those kind of skills that can really help alleviate that anxiety. I mean, of course, you can't delete it entirely, but right. You give them more choices. That's great. That's really excellent. So the next question was what components of this class do you think are most effective for your students?
I would say not just in Lightspeed, but just in the classes in general, are areas that focus on that I would call foundational. The order of operations are so important. I also say discussing not only addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, but what are those operations doing? And why do we use these operations? And having students really look at, you got a sum, you got a difference, you got a product or a quotient, but what does it mean? Why did that solve the problem? And then in Lightspeed, and then just in any class, after every problem that we practice in class, we talk about it. Does this answer make sense? And I find that students really understand the four operations. When they really understand, they're better able to take test questions that revolve around word problems. If I know that this is the operation, this is why I'm using it, this is the word problem, this is what it's asking. So I think that stemmed out years ago when I was teaching developmental classes at the campus. All the math instructors, we would get together and talk about what are some of the concerns we're seeing. And I think one of the classes at the time had a 20% pass rate. And we identified that the students were really having difficulty with order of operations, fractions, and then fractions, and working with addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. But really, what were those doing in a problem, and why do we use them? That was where a breakdown was coming from, and that was causing the most problems for students. So those are what we hit hard, or at least what I hit hard in every class, the whys.
Oh, absolutely. And that does tie into how that can move away from that stress of this is why it takes away some of the power from the fear.
Mm-hmm. Math classes, at least in my point of view, is we should be having discussions. We should be talking as we would in a reading and writing class and discussing what we're doing, what we're reading. But this is just with math.
Yeah, move away from this is the right answer, this is the wrong answer. With our students come in with that because that's the systems they came from. But getting the right answer is not the end all be all. And I tried to, it took a while, with each class that when I was teaching, it's we don't want that. let's take a step back. It's not about what's the right answer. It's how we got there.
Oh my gosh, exactly. I will tell students, here's some practice problems. I don't call it homework. I call it practice problems, because if you're going to practice, you're going to want it. But if you just give me the answers, then okay, that's fine. I don't really care about the answers. Yeah, okay, you got them. But how? You just said it. How did you get them? Let me see your thinking.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I mentioned earlier, like why I did those math journals. I'm like, I want to hear how you got there. That's what's important to me. What do you think? And it's one of those things where it has to be an instructional routine where it's like the students are like, this is very bizarre. I never had to write about math before. Mm-hmm. And then, then they do it and then they're like, oh, okay, I'm actually thinking about the process. So you're being reflective. So Mike, you mentioned a lot about the whys, and I want to come back to that. Why do we do operations? I want to hear what you tell students.
I'll open up with, let's just look at addition. Okay, so if we're adding the same thing, same element, same number, same group of people, whatever it is that if it's a repeated amount, we're going to add. So addition is going to allow us to just kind of consolidate repeated movements. Subtraction, we're looking for the difference between two amounts. We're looking for distance. So when we approach problems, is it asking us to find a distance? We might be talking about subtraction. Multiplication, that one gets fun because now we're doing repeated addition, and that's going to consolidate to multiplication. I might have misspoke earlier, getting excited, talking about math. So if something's going to be a repeated amount, like if the person's walking 5 miles a day for 400 days, I don't want to add that. I just want to multiply it. And then division, I'll ask them, okay, maybe it's asking us how many something is in something else, or maybe it's asking us to take an amount and break it off into equal piles. Well, then we're going to be looking at division.
Ooh, okay. So you're visualizing it with your students there.
I have to visualize things. I'll bring in cards, marbles, pennies, and we'll move things around.
Well, that makes pennies useful, at least. That's good.
Right?
No kidding. But the use of manipulatives is just one of those really great best practices for math. And I think that's a really good segue into the next question, because you've been talking a lot already about a lot of the best practices that you've used. So are there any other best practices for delivering math instruction that you would like to share?
Make it fun and interactive as much as possible. Just today, we were talking about interest. I equals PRT problem. So interest equals principal times rate times time. So we jumped on Google and we started looking up houses around here in Valencia County. So someone picked Bosque Farms. And we looked up the current interest rate. So, this is what's going on in our area. Also, I'd like to make problems relatable to where we're at. So, for example, if we're going to do a D equals RT problem, we'll say, here we are at UNM-Valencia. If we traveled this fast, assuming we have to make a lot of assumptions here when there's no acceleration, how long should it take us to get to McDonald's over there on Main Street, right there at Los Lentes? And then so I'd like to try to make things relatable to where we're at, hopefully. And some of the students will say, oh, I thought about this the other day because I was here where we were talking about McDonald's on Main Street years ago. And this has probably been about 15 years. There was a magazine in the library, and I believe it was titled Mathematics Instruction or something. One of the articles was about an instructor that turned homework into a learning experience. So she would give homework or tests, and whatever problems the students missed, she would say, okay, this is your score, and it could be a bad score. If you want to get all your points back, you have to do an analysis of the problem you got wrong. What did you do wrong, and how are you going to fix it? And you have to write, on the side, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it, and this is how it's going to correct the problem. And I freaking love that. That I have used ever since. Sometimes the students don't like it, but it is really helpful because it really focuses them on what they're doing and why. Something else that I brought to class is what I call ELI5 problems. And I think Richard Feynman said something about Einstein. If you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, then you don't understand it. So I'll give problems to my students like, explain to me like I'm 5, why are we using division in this problem? Or why are we using multiplication? And they're not solving anything, but they're writing to me, this is why I'm doing this.
I really love how we keep coming back to this idea of the journey, right? The learning process versus the answer. And all of this, everything, making it fun, having them correct it, but explain, how they corrected it, why they corrected it, all of that. And explaining it like you're explaining it to a 6-year-old. All of it is about the learning process and having students understand the learning process rather than just trying to get to the answer. Of course, we want to have the right answer on the exam, but you have to know how to get there consistently every time. So if you focus on that learning process, you will get to that right answer. You just have to focus on the learning process.
Right, because then it becomes something that transcends the test. It's not just about passing the exam, but now I have this skill for life. I know what I'm doing and why I'm doing this particular math operation or whatever I need math for. It serves this. This is why I'm doing it.
And that's really the whole point of adult education anyway, is teaching skills, because it's those skills that they're being tested on, not necessarily finding the right answer. It's finding out that they can go through these processes, whether it's reading, writing, science, social studies, or math. It doesn't matter. It's going through that process and being able to demonstrate that.
I also let them know, I'll tell the students, I'll flat out be truthful. I have no idea what particular types of questions they're going to throw at you on the test. But I guarantee it, if you understand, if you viscerally know why you're doing what you're doing, there's nothing they can throw at you that you will not be able to handle.
Absolutely.
This interview will continue on the next part of this episode. Thank you for listening to the NMEA podcast. Connect with Adult Ed, the NMEA podcast, is a project of the Propel Professional Learning System and is funded by the New Mexico Higher Education Department's Adult Education Division. Thank you for listening.